how a global data center safety provider can provide clients. So your company is a global provider, global safety provider in and around the data center industry, and you're looking to find new clients. It's a great question. So what it first comes down to is we need to understand what kinds of data centers have you been most successful with. Because you're global, by very definition, you're going to likely have a pretty complex go-to-market strategy, a pretty complex go-to-market playbook, because the first question you'll likely need to answer is where you need to translate, where you need to localize with your sales and marketing. And that'll have implications on your marketing, your messaging, your customer insight, who you hire, what they actually do, the buyer's journey, all of that stuff. But at the minimum, for a large enterprise company that has the resources to be able to sell safety products and services in and around the data center industry on a global basis, you'll be indicating global on your ideal client profile. And because of that, it's incredibly important to make sure that you actually have the resources to do this well, to execute marketing, sales, account management, product management, channel partnerships, service delivery, finance, operations, everything that's necessary to be able to execute and grow your business globally. Second, you need to understand what size data centers you've been most successful selling to globally. If you have the resources to sell globally, you likely may not have any size problems delivering to the largest of the large. Maybe you're able to sell your safety products and services all the way up to companies as huge as like Equinix or Digital Realty or NTT or something like that. However, with that in mind, there may be a floor, there may be a minimum size that a company needs to be able to afford your minimum level of engagement, to afford your minimum level of products or services. So there may still be a size component that becomes relevant. Maybe data center related businesses with fewer than 50 employees, fewer than say 5 million in US revenue or their local currency equivalent. Maybe they're just not going to be able to have the resources to engage your company. So you'll have a geographic component, you'll have a size component, and then maybe there's certain industries where your approach is better suited than others, especially when it comes to safety, which is the first cousin of compliance and certifications and things along those lines. So perhaps your company has deep expertise in financial services, but you're not particularly strong in healthcare or something like that. So all of that will come into play as you develop your go-to-market strategy, as understanding the geographic footprint and whether you truly have the resources to market, sell, and service on a global basis, potentially in a dozen languages or more, localized in a dozen or more different instances with your messaging and with your sales and services team and delivery team. Then there's the size component, and then there's the business model, vertical, industry kind of components. Once you know that, it becomes much easier to figure out in each of these regions, for each of these playbooks, who are the most important kinds of stakeholders that you want to engage with. Is there a safety executive? Is it a facilities executive? Is it a COO? Is it a CFO? Is it an ESG? Is it a compliance person? Only you can answer that, and that's largely going to come from studying where you've been most successful. It's going to come from looking in your CRM, your customer relationship management system, looking at your case studies, and figuring out who are the typical kinds of stakeholders that are most impactful to the relationship that you have with that particular company. The most important kind of stakeholder you would designate as your primary buyer persona. The second most important would be your secondary buyer persona. And maybe in an enterprise, there's a third category of stakeholder that you need to be building a relationship with. And how are you building a relationship with this person and today and going forward on a regular basis? It's recognizing that most people are more sales allergic than ever. And most buyers want a self-guided, self-propelled buyer's journey more than ever. They will be willing to speak with your sales team, but only when they're very, very close to a purchase decision. Gartner found that number most recently to be about 83%. Meaning that most of your buyers are typically about 83% of the way through their buyer's journey before they're open to having vendor contact, before they're open to having a conversation with your sales team. So it is incredibly important that your company figure out a way to get in early and get in there often. And not as a transaction-focused, commission-hungry salesperson, but being seen, being perceived, repositioning your client-facing team to be seen as teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, consultants, and perhaps even thought leaders. And the way you're able to do that, in addition to rethinking your team showing up as like Big Four consultants, is your team needs to show up and be able to educate and build trust at scale with the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. How do you know that you're sending in the right people to do this education and trust building? How do you know that you're talking about the right topics? Because you're not going to wing it. You're going to do the actual research. You're actually going to go out and build and refine your buyer personas. So you know what are their biggest goals, what are their biggest challenges, what causes them to prioritize a certain kind of initiative, what's stressing them out to no end, what's causing them to have to work nights and weekends when that's not their normal hours, what's causing their vacations to get compromised, all of these things. Once you know the consensus on this, it's way easier to develop a content and events calendar that allows you to have an active role in as many of those 28 touch points as possible between complete stranger and purchase decision when it comes to anything and everything having to do with your safety products. But at the end of the day, this is a top-down cultural company culture, major initiative that has to start with executive leadership. Someone in an executive sponsor level role of your company that has oversight over the whole go-to-market team across sales, marketing, account management, product, channel partnerships needs to say that, hey, going forward, we are going to be perceived as the go-to experts in our space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center safety. It's up to you to figure out the playbook that you want to use, but just understand most of your buyer personas are preferring to ask questions on search and on their AI assistants. They're preferring to post questions on social media to their peers who they trust far more than vendors. They're preferring to watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, attend webinars, attend educational events, review websites. All of these things are incredibly impactful on the early and the middle stages and even part of the late stages of the buyer's journey. And for many companies that built their sales and marketing playbooks decades ago and really haven't done a major overhaul in the last several years, this in many ways could be long overdue because this isn't new. You're not going to be the first company on the block who says, gee, we should create some great webinars around data center safety. There's going to be competition. However, if you bury your head in the sand, I can assure you that you will not be in the consideration set most of the time going forward. So if you want to position your company to be seen as the go-to experts in your space, if you want to find the right clients in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center safety, it's time to get serious about showing up where they are, not where you'd like them to be, but where they actually are right now, so you can educate and build trust with them and stay with them throughout the buyer's journey. So you're nearly guaranteed a place on the short list throughout their research and decision making. And if you do this right, you will establish the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the competitive options. And in many cases, when you do this exceptionally well, your educational content helps to start gradually knocking out competitive alternatives because they're not showing up and you are. That's the key to all of this, is showing up early and often and being seen as a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, consultant, and a thought leader when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center safety.